I'd like to welcome our panelists for the next session to please take the seats in front. Our panelists who are here, please take a seat in front. The microphones have been sanitized and ready for use. So our next session, we'll hear from leaders from different sectors and on what they're doing in their respective organizations. So we have grouped them into three broad areas on policy and partnerships and PPPs, entrepreneurs, and development partners. So please, our panelists for the next session, let's take the seats at the podium. All right, so Frank will introduce our panelists, and then we will get on with the conversation and we'll be able to answer your questions, especially for our participants online.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mercy Korir. And thank you everyone for your kind attendance, for bearing with us. I recognize we are running a bit late, but we still intend to finish in time. So that's just mostly, especially for those of us who are joining us online. You don't need to worry too much about the timings. And we've had a fantastic morning session that was crowned by Dr. Gakombe. Dr. Gakombe just talking about his experience from a medical doctor who's supposed to be treating people to one of our leading entrepreneurs in the country, and I hope the lessons are well taken. Now, we move to the second session where we are trying to get more detailed discussion on how to move from rhetoric or theory into practice. So I'm honored to sit here with a very powerful panel, and Sylvia, who of course I can see on the screen. So allow me to just introduce the panel, and I'll start with Dr. Sylvia Vito. Sylvia, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, very well, thank you. Can you hear me?
All right. So Sylvia is someone I've known for quite a long time, I have to say, and across different industries, but now she's at AstraZeneca with a position of Africa Head of Acceleration. So she'll tell us a little bit more about that in a bit. Welcome, Sylvia. On my immediate right, we have Dr. Wangari Ng'ang'a, who's also been known to me for a few years. Wangari serves on the Presidential Policy and Strategy Unit, so representing the highest office in the land in these conversations. So Wangari, welcome. Next to Wangari is Jackson Kimani, Senior Director at Clinton Health Access Initiative, and I know possibly among the very few development partners who've been involved in the front line of supporting public-private collaboration projects. So welcome, Jackson. Next to Jackson is Dr. Leah Mwai, again, a professional colleague in the circle who serves as the technical advisor to the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO. That, if that is not very familiar, you'll remember it as the UK government Foreign Development Office merging with another office. Leah will tell us about it. So former DFID, basically, former DFID merging and providing support on behalf of the British government to countries like Kenya. So welcome, Leah. Next to Leah is Dr. John Mure, who's a medical doctor and entrepreneur. Very interesting story. So those of you who don't know John, you might want to catch him over break and listen to his story. But for purposes of introduction, I'll say he's a CEO of Savannah Informatics. All right. Welcome, John. And I think that is where I'll stop and hand over back to Dr. Mercy. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. So we'll get straight to the crux of the matter. And we'll start by just trying to understand the different sectors that are represented here. As I'd said earlier, we have representation from the introduction you've had from Dr. Frank Wafula is from policy and partnerships and PPP, entrepreneurs. Dr. Modeh is here. Sylvia is online development partners from CHAI and F. It's a very long one, former DFID. But we'll give Leah that chance to just explain to us the role that you as development partners, I'll start with you, Dr. Mwai, the role that you as development partners, the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office have in regard to uptake of healthcare innovations. We've had the whole morning about how the area is, how the space is, the challenges, the triumphs that we've heard from Dr. Gakombe's story. So what is your role in this?
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and I just want to appreciate everybody's here who is here, and also just say that I really enjoyed the first part of the sessions. Really think that it was, I really enjoyed the fact that we are bringing up some very important issues for the sector. Maybe first of all, to just introduce myself again. So my name is Leah Mwai. I am based at the British High Commission. I work at the East Africa Research and Innovation Hub there. Of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. And just as Frank said, so formally the UK official development assistance was delivered through DFID. And in September last year, we were merged with our foreign office to form this super department called the FCDO. So many of you will be more familiar with DFID, but obviously everybody will understand, will know the British High Commission, which is where we sit. So just to say quickly that speaking on behalf of the UK FCDO, just to highlight that we consider ourselves, and I think it's really undebatable that we are a key strategic partner in research and innovation. We know that, based on the partnerships that we've had in the past, and also just the UK's global position in terms of research and innovation, it's globally leading. You can see like some of the work that's coming from the vaccine on AstraZeneca, obviously it's coming from a lot of leadership and partnership between our researchers and the UK institutions. So just to say that we see ourselves as really a strategic partner and a really close one in that regard. And just to say quickly, our research hub is a regional hub. So Kenya is one of the countries we represent, but we also work regionally across, some of the other countries in the region, including Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania. And I'd like to talk more about that if anyone is interested. And really, we see our role as really driving coherence and impact of scientific research, partnerships, innovation to support in support of sustainable development, poverty alleviation, of course. And one key thing for us is this idea of inclusive growth. And so the work that we've been doing is supporting a lot things around research capability, ecosystem strengthening, promoting equitable partnerships between the UK government and UK industry and Kenyan industry, where there is mutual benefit, and really promoting synergies. A lot of the things that have been said here around maximizing economies of scale so that we can be able to really link these key sectors, the private sector, the public sector, and the innovators and the private sector, so that we can be able to really accelerate the rate at which we are able to scale or diffuse innovation from academia or from the industry into something that can be scaled up by government. I'll stop there, but I'll be very happy to provide more, more insights on that.
Thank you for that introduction. Definitely we'll come back to you, especially from funding perspective, just to understand what your expectations are. And so we'll come back to that question. Next, just as an introduction, I want to go to Sylvia joining us online from AstraZeneca about your role in regards to the uptake of the healthcare innovations. Obviously, you have been a big part of the COVID-19 pandemic as AstraZeneca, but what else from where you sit?
Thank you very much, and I hope you can hear me clearly. Yeah. So as mentioned, I start the Africa business. Yeah, I served AstraZeneca business from an Africa leadership perspective, looking at our direct investment in Africa healthcare in shaping how the public-private collaborations work, whether this is through a lot of the what we call strengthening primary healthcare systems across the NCDs, whether it's investing in preventive areas, community investments, sustainability programs, whether it's in capacity building through the associations, or whether it's in driving equitable access of the quality medicines from AstraZeneca into the public space and of course the private space across the African cluster. And what you've mentioned, the vaccine has been a big sort of conversation that has put AstraZeneca firmly on the table. Beyond that, however, it's important to reiterate that we've been players for over 32 years in Africa in the NCD space, whether you talk about prostate, breast cancer, hypertension, diabetes, among other NCD diseases. So my role specifically in this conversation is that I lead the company's investment in the NCD space, whether it's around the preventive areas or in collaborations with other stakeholders in providing diagnostic support to our public sector institutions or direct donation to governments across Africa and Kenya, of course, specifically in improving diagnosis and quality of care, of course, lastly, ensuring that our products are equitably accessible through either supply chain remodeling, pricing engagements, or anything that will bring quality medicines closer to the last mile patients in Kenya. So that would be my role, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. So we'll get back to that just a little bit more around how, as a multinational, that you're trying to transition that into practice on the ground. Now, coming back to Kenya, and Dr. John Mude, we've heard about the clear intention to scale up innovation and support innovation from a funder's perspective. And in the morning, we heard from the Director of Planning at the Ministry, the intention to support that through a policy framework. Maybe to just start by introducing yourself, John, and then just tell us about Savannah and your experience engaging in this space as an innovator, a local innovator in Kenya.
Good afternoon, everyone. And my background was initially in medicine, and then we ended up in technology in the commercial space, which was just private insurers and private hospitals, where we maintain and develop technologies that enable the identification or the transmission of various transactions, be it payments, be it pre-authorization, invoices, and the like. We also do a lot of global health work, especially when you consider that more than half of Kenyans achieve their healthcare needs in the public sector. So you really can't ignore the public sector. And also when it comes to technology, this is very interesting. When you go to the private space of healthcare, most technologies will be in the finance side, the billing, the receptionist, there will be a lot of technologies. But actually, it's in the public sector that you find in the various CCC, TB clinics, you'll find no papers in some places. So if you want to see good technologies, you have to see both the public, their contribution towards digital health, as well as the private sector. And of course, the future is, when you think about consumer digital health, you have to take the learnings from the public sector, which is mostly in the care delivery for communicable diseases, and also the private sector, which is more around the billing and the invoicing. Thank you.
Definitely, as you've said, innovations have been looking at almost everything else, but not the core issues of health. And we heard from Dr. Gakombe, he's looking at it through and through. Dr. Wangari, you sit at do I call a very strategic and a vantage point where you need to see everything from end to end. You've had everything from the private sector, from government, definitely from the entrepreneurs. How do you work to support and make the innovation space easier, better for healthcare delivery by all the players that, are here, because policy obviously is very key.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mercy Korir. And thank you for our hosts here, Strathmore. The presidency registers gratitude for being invited. How do we support? I think I'll borrow from what Dr. Gakombe said earlier. Innovations really start from where you see a problem. I'd like to challenge us as we're having today's conversation, not to focus on innovation as tech, so that I went somewhere and I didn't have a paper and I put my fingerprint and therefore that's technology or innovation. And let's think about system level innovation as well, right? And then let's be really granular. So I would presume a lot of our panelists here have been in some sort of clinical setting, maybe not the rest of the audience, but I will describe to you that there is a thing we call a drip stand. A drip stand literally holds fluids as they are being run into you. This fluid could be blood, it could be water, it could be sugar, it could be anything. In most of our government facilities, drip stands are a nail on the wall, because the actual drip stand, mguu ilitokana. I would presume everyone understands what I mean by that. So as we are clamoring to manufacture vaccines, and please let us go ahead and manufacture vaccines, I need to understand why none of the private sector has told me I can make you a drip stand. So that as we are really striving to get there, right? To a lot of the innovation in fintech, and in financial solutions, private insurance, billing that we see in the private sector, in service delivery in the public sector for vertical programs where it's basically paperless. Let's not forget the very small ones. And I guess, as everyone said, COVID became that opportunity where we're asking ourselves, how comes we're importing cotton wool? How comes we're importing tongue depressors? Tongue depressor, it's a fat toothpick. It's actually not, it's not that, maybe I should ask my seniors. I'm not oversimplifying this. It is a fat toothpick. It is possible to make it here. And then you don't have so many of the other complications that come with monopolistic markets. I need us to get into the vaccine space. Why? Because we've seen where, how we would basically get stuck, which is where we are. Only 2% of Africa is vaccinated, 70% of the global north would be. So yes, we need to be in that space where we make injectables, where we make vaccines, where we make insulin, where we make anti-cancer medications. I completely agree. But please make me a drip stand first, because before you make me the drip stand, my nurse, instead of administering medicines, is trying to hold the drip up, or I'm making the mother of the child who's been admitted with malaria, who's on artemisinin, to literally hold it up. And for those of you who have worked in public hospitals, you have literally witnessed this. It is wrong, it is immoral, it is a problem that none of you are interested in solving, because I don't know, it's not sexy enough, or making me a fat toothpick called a tongue depressor. Let's start at the very, very basic. And then let's think about system level innovations. And Mr. Macharia, head of our PPP unit, kind of alluded to it when he was making his presentation. We start with a particular approach for UHC. We waive user fees and we say, everybody come. And for some reason, the calculations at the time, the institutional arrangements at the time, that was the best approach. And then we pivot and we say we want to go the NHIF way. What does everyone say? We're confused. That is not innovation. When we pivot, we are expected to have known from 1963 the way, right? So when government innovates, also appreciate. Don't always be too critical that a change has come. I'd actually like to challenge our private health insurances. I'm not sure that any of you is as innovative as NHIF. NHIF consistently is a front runner in provider payment mechanisms, right? In the number of people that it is able to serve with challenges, admittedly. However, consistently from the year 2015, when the premiums went up, provider payment mechanisms, capitation, the word capitation was unknown until NHIF introduced it. The word rebate was unknown until NHIF introduced it. So let's give credit where credit is due. But also, as we said earlier, let's probably spend a lot more of our energies employing our targets where we are stronger, as opposed to bringing each other, almost in tension. When I am sitting where I am sitting today, I'm still Kenyan. My ID number is 2467. I am Kenyan. I am not a foreigner. And I'm sitting here today, and tomorrow I could be sitting here where Frank is sitting, and Frank could be sitting here. So he's not my competition or my enemy. In fact, I could not have a better partner. I don't know if I answered your question, Mercy, but I have said what I came to say, that I want a drip stand and I want a fat toothpick.
I think the take-home message is that we go granular to the very basic, to the fat toothpick, as you call it. So I think that captures it all. And I think the entrepreneurs are listening, the funders are listening, the development partners are listening, that as we still look at macro, there are still things at the micro level that are yet to be addressed. I don't know, those are some of the things that people remember of the experiences in a public hospital, because I don't think there is a private hospital, Dr. Gakombe, maybe you can tell us, that has parents holding their fluids or medicines because there's no drip stand. So I think there in itself is a problem that needs a solution, that we go to the micro level. Frank, you already have a solution. The entrepreneur you are seen.
And that's just one of the gaps, Dr. Wangari. And, I really like how you put this, and two things that have really come from your discussion is the level of granularity, that needs to be there, and the fact that we need to take a cooperation rather than competition approach to solving our problems. Now, let's talk granular. Jackson, I happen to know a little bit about some of the amazing work that you've been involved in, trying to translate innovative thinking into an actual partnership across Kenya. Actually, I know you are working across different countries as Chai, but just Kenya specifically, where I think you've had a lot of involvement. Again, just introduce yourself and just tell us about what you're doing and the experience of trying to translate all this partnership discussion into the government, public sector, specifically counties on the ground, taking up this innovation.
Mic check. Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Frank. Coming after Dr. Wangari, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I told Wangari I'm going to sit next to her so I can be deferring questions when they arise. I'm like, Wangari can expand on that. When you start dropping phrases like a fat toothpick, I need to figure a counter to that. I work with Chai, Clinton Health Access Initiative. Some of you might know of it. Kimani is my name, and we work across many different areas. Chai has been in Kenya since the year 2005. And so not too long ago, but we measure ourselves in terms of the impact during that time. When we came in and we saw sort of what the schedule of the panel is going to be, Wangari turned to me and asked me, so what does innovation mean? And I told her, it just means the same thing as UHC. You ask 10 people what UHC means, you get 10 different definitions of this. I do really appreciate how Wangari has brought this back to the basics, because I think by default, most of us, when they hear innovation, they move to tech. And yet we are operating in an environment where basics are still a challenge. We're still grappling with things that in some other countries, that was a 1930, 1940 problem. And there's nothing wrong with the advancements that we are seeing happen today. So this is not an either or, it's both and. Chai's origins was actually in an innovation in terms of approach. When we came into the scene, we came in with an approach towards procurement of ARVs. At the time we were talking about 2003, 2004, most governments had very limited budgets for procurement of ARVs. So the nature of the environment, the ecosystem at that time was low volumes, very high margins for the pharma companies, and then erratic payments from government to pharma. And all we did was look at how could we improve that, not necessarily throw money at it. In fact, we didn't even put a single cent into it. And all we did was organize the market, shape the market in a way that it could be optimal. So by speaking to various governments within a region, we could aggregate demand. So as you're talking to a pharma company, you're not coming in with 1 million doses. Now you're probably coming in with 10 million doses. So your purchasing power is enhanced and you can get, concessions in terms of pricing. Then we just stood as guarantors that if government fails to pay on time, we will pay. And then we follow up with government. So whatever premiums you're putting on in terms of risk of default and such, get rid of that. Simple approach, sounds rather intuitive today. And just by doing that, we were able to bring down the pricing of ARVs by 70%. Just that. We didn't raise money, millions of dollars to put into this. I mean, that's innovation. That's what we're discussing about. Closer to the recent times, and I think this is what you're alluding to, Frank. And I think was Bwana Mashari, I think, who highlighted it. This donor transition happening, whether we like it or not. And if you're not prepared, you'll be caught flat-footed as a county, as a government, because the day will come and you realize, well, USAID is no longer here, or they're no longer funding the programs that you're used to. And unfortunately, the posture you'll find a lot in government is, we'll believe it when it happens. And I don't blame government because, there's been attempts in the past where the timeline has been postponed. Now, in thinking about what innovative financing mechanisms exist that government can still tap into, and I do really appreciate the work that was done to develop the PPC, the Kenya Health PPC strategy, because, and I encourage those, I think there are booklets, Bwana Mashari, are available for that PPC strategy, because it does spell out their digital, in fact, even better, yes, we don't want to kill trees, digital. It spells out pathways that as a government, as a county government, as a private sector, you can leverage in engaging between you as a private partner and the government, those entities being able to come together. And we have looked at those pathways, and in the absence of perhaps the PPP Act being an enabling platform for what is required in the health services sector, we are leveraging that through the PPDA, the Public Procurement and Disposal Act, to bring together the private sector and county governments, that they can be able to jointly work together and enable that the expansion that are needed and that are needed in the lab services sector can be realized. Most of you will agree, within a hospital environment, lab services are some of the most lucrative services you will find. And what CHAI is doing is just packaging that, making it that it can be translated in a language that is clear and understandable for the private sector, showing the value that there is for a private sector to put their own money into this and have a return from it. And a return that is reasonable. We're not talking about exploitative returns here, reasonable within market rates. But then for the government, the county governments, on the other hand, can realize the objective of service delivery. Because we all agree those services are not the level they need to be at. We can wait for the next 10, 15, 20 years when we can raise the monies from public coffers to do that. And in that time duration, be able to live with a cost that is commensurate with that. Or we figure out approaches that bring the timeline up, that we can address these issues in a way that everybody goes home happy. And that's part of what we've been engaging with the county governments. So it's just as I wind up, there's a challenge also of the mindset shift, the paradigm shift in thinking about this. Because when people see, for instance, a chai show up, they expect grants, donations. And when you come in with an approach that is veering off the traditional way of doing things, it takes some time to explain, to convince, to show the value that even in the absence of the grants that you've been used to, there's actually something better here that could be more sustainable, that if chai wakes up tomorrow and decides they don't want to be here, you're not left high and dry. You still have something that you can be able to bank on. Sorry, I took too long.
No. No, but you have brought us to what I'd promised, Dr. Moy, that we'll come back to the issue of funding. I mean, you can only support somebody for so long. You can only get grants for so long. So what really should we be thinking about, Dr. Moy? You know, from Jackson's illustration, it is possible that you can be innovative in a way that you're not dishing out grants. So how should we be thinking about this? And then after this, just before, anyone with a question, a burning question, just raise your hand so that we can bring the microphone close to you. But we'll start with the questions from our participants online immediately after this.
Thank you. Just really stimulating inputs from the panel. I'm trying to think how strategic mine can be after those inputs. But let me answer that question. First of all, obviously from a UK funder perspective, but also bringing in my own perspective as a healthcare professional who's kind of moved from being a direct, direct delivery of care to really thinking about how we support ecosystems and some of what I've learned about that. So the first thing I'd say, basically in terms of how we think differently is one of the things that the UK government is really proud of is the kind of real support that we've just been providing in terms of capability. I think some of the most prestigious scholarships and fellowships actually in health, UK government, and Kenya is one of the leads actually, and we are really, really proud of the partnerships that we have created there. These partnerships go way back, like 30 years back. I can even mention a few, and many of us actually are beneficiaries of those, including our star convener today, Frank and myself and others. And one of the things, and we've continued to do that. So one of the things we are continuing to do is to really continue with those fellowships, create platforms that encourage that collaboration. And one of the things we've learned through talking to our fellows, our own journeys as people who have been, really highly trained scientists, is there is this gap where, once you're trained, what do? Only a few people can stay in the university with their, with their degrees and the papers they write. A lot of the products they are producing right now are research products that are really academic and really geared to an external market, not to this market at all, And a lot of times that also has challenges in terms of they're very highly trained, but what can they do? And I think COVID taught us that. We have very highly trained biochemists, virologists, very highly, very, I would say very sophisticated subjects, but we could not mobilize that to the level that we would like to not be dependent on external support for things we need in the healthcare system. So in short, I guess what I would say I've learned from a lot of the work that we've been doing supporting these strategic partnerships for capacity strengthening in research and innovation is the need, and I would like to challenge, I really enjoyed the first session actually, to challenge our private sector and the public sector as well. How can we create value chains? How can we make real opportunities for these scientists that we have created with some of the most highly recognized academic qualifications the world over, to be able to come here and engage in a valuable way, partnering with the private sector, to be able to create things here. So I guess, so that's why I say that one of the things we are really interested about is this idea of ecosystem strengthening, promoting linkages. One of the things we've seen that is a big key gap in that is that academia is working very much in isolation and from government, as somebody said, I think it's you, Dr. Gakombe, who said that, once people cross over to government, even if you are in classroom together, they're on that side and you're on this side. But how can we really create those synergies and ways to collaborate so that we create opportunities for our people? And saying that, also raising the fact that from, and I think this is something, Frank, we've discussed with you a lot. So when we are thinking of development, we see sectors, but we also see cross-sector, and COVID was a very good example for that. So how do we translate this learning and this knowledge? And the health sector has been a real beneficiary of a lot of the development assistance that has happened over time. As we hear, that's now going to shift because of the way we have grown, the kind of capabilities we have now, and we need to now move more to doing than getting support. But how do we make sure that we are beyond, as I said, the paperwork and doing that? How are we doing from what we've learned, moving from research support and training and stuff like that to actually mobilizing action on the ground and actually distilling also some of that learning that's coming from the health sector to other sectors, so that now we are talking about a development approach that is about inclusive growth, so that we're not really just working in a silo also as a health sector, but thinking more broadly. So I would say, there are opportunities there, and I think there is a lot of, there needs to come, one of the things as well, I would like to challenge our private sector and government as well in terms of the enabling environment, is that a lot of the challenge we see for our scientists and our innovators is the fact that if they need funding, then they must get it from outside. And that when it's not coming from the local ecosystem, it means it also has to align with some outside, which is, we must understand, everybody, every player, ecosystem player has interest. How can the private sector and government create an enabling environment that allows our innovators and our scientists to be able to also negotiate for things that they can do to drive the local ecosystem here? And some of it is also just in terms of funding. How can we get more support and more engagement of our private sector with enabling government for our scientists and innovators to be able to participate more fully without having to, go abroad, once they've gotten the very high quality training and everything. And finally, I'll just say, which is very important because this is something else we have also learned over, which is obviously very important for the UK government and came across during COVID, is just for us the importance of linking all this with our diplomacy. How do we really make sure that we are working in this political economy and really ensuring that we are working together and enhancing our diplomatic relationships and the way we are able to meet together and really, because some of these problems that we are trying to solve are bigger than any one country. And that is why we need to also think about this, about the opportunities for diplomacy, but as well as of leveraging of what we can offer each other. I'll stop there, but happy to continue the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mwai. We can just give another hearty round of applause. Thank you. All right. We'll go to the questions. I'll start with Sylvia. This is the question from Joshua. It's probably not, I'll not ask all of it directly to you, because I think the best person that should be answering it is the PPB. So Sylvia, Dr. Vito, you can just give your thoughts on it. And Joshua is just asking about parallel imports of products from other markets. When now they get into Kenya, particularly on drugs, you find that they are more costly in the Kenyan market compared to the same drug in a different market. I don't know what your thoughts on this, because specifically Joshua was just asking why the PPB does this. But
Yeah.
just your thoughts on that.
Indeed, the biggest component of that answer sits with our regulator, but as a player in the pharmaceutical industry, I would also want to take what is our responsibility as a pharma company and members of CAPI. Our commitment as AstraZeneca, and partly what I lead, is to ensure that we drive what we call market access. And market access is not only shaping the ecosystem, building the system, supporting whatever is required along the patient journey, but ensuring that while we invest in education, awareness, capacity building, donation of equipment, and all the infrastructure required, at the tail end, where are the guidelines? What do those require? Are the medicines, are they available? And not only are they available, are they accessible from a price point. So our role and our commitment as AstraZeneca and part of what I lead is to ensure that we look at the supply chain. For example, one of the biggest successes we've had in the recent past due to the same issue around whether it's parallel imports or pricing challenges is to say, if you take asthma as an example, through rerouting our supply chain model to ensure that any public facility that is procuring buys directly through our import logistics partner, who would be IHS, so that we can reduce the cost to patient or the cost to government. And it has seen one of the products go down from 8,000 shillings to 700 Kenya shillings to the patient. So sometimes the solutions lie within us as players in the pharma industry. Relook at our supply chain, seek collaboration of other partners involved in the distribution and supply models, and therefore also work on our pricing points. So that's one. Secondly, is to ensure that we also working with the regulator to address what is it that actually drives the product imports. Sometimes it's molecules that out there are registered and probably are not locally registered and therefore not available. Sometimes it's the price parity. And then sometimes it's just what it is, willing buyer, willing seller. So sometimes even the responsibility goes back to say, if you're going to buy something that is not sort of approved for your market, there's a responsibility to sit with you as a consumer. But I think I'd like to pass on to the regulator to also share a wider perspective, but also taking responsibility that as private players, we need to address the gaps that create opportunities for parallel imports. While the regulator is trying to enforce that the right thing gets done, we also need to contribute to decreasing the size of the problem.
Thank you, Dr. Vito. I know I put you on the spot there, but I think you have ably given your thoughts on that particular question. And Dr. Mashogu was around here. We'll ask him as the president of the Pharmaceutical Society of Kenya once we get him in. So the next question from Kinyuru Mine, I'll break it into two. One from government, and then the second one is young or small entrepreneurs. And the second part I'll ask Dr. Mode, because when you started your journey in Savannah Informatics, I think by all means, but I think we can still call you young entrepreneur. But I can say you started when you were a young entrepreneur. So Mina is asking, how successfully can healthcare innovation and sustainable solutions be realized, particularly for young or small entrepreneurs? And the first part I'll ask to Dr. Ongare.
Thank you. I'll say I'm still a young entrepreneur. We still have Dr. Kakombe doing out of entrepreneurship. Thank you. So
the benchmark.
Yeah, it's a benchmark. We'll get there. So one thing is that we tend to go for the attractive innovation, the attractive processes, as Dr. Ongare had asked. How comes we still neglect to do basic things? In fact, we work in the same hospitals, but I'm more likely to go to the CCC, the TB clinic, but not go to check what are the needs out there. And I will say that it all starts with the need that can be scaled up or be rewarded in either commercial or another way. And to do that, you need to have somebody underwriting the innovation. Sometimes it's my customers who, from what they pay us, that we use that. And sometimes it will be a development partner, like you said, or WHO, somebody who will actually underwrite that. I typically have not come across shareholders that would want to underwrite risky innovations. So that's actually becomes a big challenge. But the best thing that you can use sometimes to solve that challenge is on the talent side. So we end up with young Kenyans who are brave, who are willing to take risks, who are able to research, and that talent will always, at the end of the day, enable you to innovate, even using the least capital. So, and then the market then is the one that comes and says, we see with the technology you have, it's not really scaled up, but it can do 3 things. But by giving you commercial contracts, it can do 300 things. But sometimes for the young entrepreneurs, despite the lack of capital, if you are talented, if you're able to research enough, show and reproduce that this innovation can do this and this under these conditions, the market will always have somebody. And for us, what we realize is that it will be going to the hospitals, to the insurers, and it's the people who will actually listen to you will never be large institutions. In fact, people always want to work with large institutions. I want to work with a national teaching and referral hospital. No, go for that sub-county hospital, for that health center in a sub-county, aggregate that, show that the innovation is working in a sub-county setting, then go to the county, then to the national. Most of our work 2013 was in small facilities whereby the cost of bureaucracy was so low that you could do a lot within 1 week. And even by the time you go to large organizations, you know what to say, what not to say, because you have already learned what they value. The same thing with the insurer side. Never go for the big ones. Start small and reproduce the technology. And then you're able to go to a large organization with those 100 pages document that they all have. Of course, the problem is the government might ask you for their 1,000-page document, and you had just become good at 100 pages. Yeah, but that's my take. Thank you.
By the time you're getting to 1,000 pages, you will have learned and even polished your language.
You'll have a team.
And a team. Thank you. I think that's a good answer. And Maina, you've gotten some tips there. So the first part of this question, Dr. Wangari, is really talking about the government, and Dr. Gakombe wonders to, when you say government, who in government? So I'll just ask it as it has been put here. And Maina says, dealing with government is loaded with suspicion, which makes public-private partnerships or collaborations difficult to establish. Then he mentions the issues of pending bills and long outstanding debts. Like, for example, he's saying unpaid NHIF claims that cripple young enterprises that might otherwise be key players in the innovation space. I don't know your comments on that.
No, I was actually going to say it sounded more like a complaint as opposed to a question. But you've asked for my comments, which I think is right. So bureaucracy, which I think, if you were to categorize words as bad or good, I'm sure a lot of people would categorize bureaucracy as a negative word. But systems are in place for a reason. We do tend to probably overextend their use, and that can be quite frustrating. But process should breed accountability, and immediately that it is obvious that it is possible to veer away from process, then it is possible to veer away from accountability. I'll put a full stop there. And then I will say, good people are good people and bad people are bad people. And they are there in government, and they are there in the private sector, and they are there in the development space. And I'll also put a full stop there. And then I'll hope you can join the two statements. It would be a little bit disingenuous to assume that every participant in a particular venture has the best interest at heart. And so therefore you must depersonalize, which is why bureaucratic systems exist, for purposes of accountability. And there have been cases of fraud, wastage, and abuse. And again, I want to bring it to the hospital level. Let's just talk there before we go macro, where I present looking the way I look. I'm assuming I'm on camera, right? So I am visible. I am a civil servant. I told you my ID number. So I am on the NHIF civil servant scheme. And let's assume Dr. Mwai here is my sister, but she's not a civil servant. But because she's now called Dr. Lea Nganga for the purposes of this conversation, I can avail my card to her to get services at Dr. Gakombe's hospital because she's my sister. How else am I expecting that she'll pay? And this happens amongst us who are all citizens of this country before you belong to whichever institution. So if I'm taking a little bit longer, just to make sure that these incidences of fraud, wastage, and abuse are reducing. I hope you get what I'm alluding to. It happens all the time. And I want us to be very honest with each other. And maybe if you haven't experienced it, engage the practitioners. And it's quite unfortunate to say the majority of them are actually in the private sector. You don't find this happening as much in the public sector, where there's a lot of impersonation, a lot of sale of cards so that people can get benefits that are not due to them. Having said that, there's a lot of innovative processes we could probably borrow from people like Savannah Informatics to speed up processes that should otherwise not take as long in terms of pending bills, in terms of making payments upfront, on time, to ensure that young innovators, as they have been called, don't go under as they continue service delivery. So in short, there are good people, there are bad people. Bureaucracy has a purpose. We can learn from Savannah Informatics.
Thank you. It's what Dr. Mode said, the cost of you cost your bureaucracy, find where it is less. So Dr. Gakwambe, I see you think you want to give a comment. Okay, allow me to take a comment there and then I come to you. Just tell us your name and which.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Lyndon Marani, and mine also goes probably to the entire panel. Huh? We have this mindset, or whenever you tell any Kenyan anything about PPP, the first thing that comes to mind is the expressway. Yeah. If you look even at our policies, yeah, they're all geared towards this big projects. Yet, just going by your thinking, and I totally agree with your thinking, Dr. I find it to be absolutely beautiful. Why aren't our local communities, for example, being the ones which are running the kitchens at local hospitals? That's a perfect PPP, because after all, that's where the food is grown. It's local food. They know the kind of food the patients prefer. Why isn't PPP seen to be happening at that level? The question that I want to ask is, how do we demystify PPP as a concept to be something that can be done by the Mamamboga across from the hospital?
Okay, you can use my mic.
In the spirit of partnership, let me come to Wangare's rescue, even if she's not asked me to rescue her. The first thing I want to talk about is risk. You see, if you are a public servant in relation to bureaucracy, if you're a public servant, you make a mistake, Wangare must go. If you're a private person like me and I make a mistake, entrepreneurial, risk taker, nice things, even the media will say nice things about me. No, I took a risk, it didn't work, but I was adventurous. So if we are going to get the public service to become less bureaucratic, we must de-risk. We must stop treating every action taken as intentional corruption and give space for honest mistakes. 2, there was a plan. I don't know what happened to it. Wangari will tell us, so I'm putting her back in the hot seat. We wanted to put all parastatals and all government-owned bodies in a sort of sovereign wealth fund, so that KCB and all the other government shares would not be so much with treasury, there will be an organization. That sovereign wealth fund, if we create it, would be the body that would have a bit of money for risk ventures. No? Because we need to find capital, patient capital, as was mentioned by the gentleman from Philips, to help us put into these young people's ventures. And you can't do that with the annual government budget. You know, Parliament will be on your case. So we need to ring fence through that sovereign wealth fund as a tool for encouraging investment. To the young entrepreneurs, I suggest they start small. Microsoft and all those ventures started in garages. When you are trying to start with an office the size of this auditorium, you've already failed before you start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daktari. So let me start with Moi, Jackson, Wangari, and then we finish with Frank.
Great, thanks. Mine was a very difficult but simple question about why we don't have a Kenyan Bill Gates, or Kenyan entrepreneurs who are able to go, to be able to operate at that scale. It's very, how do I answer this question in a way? So I would say it goes back to what I said first. One of the things we've learned through what we funded through some of the work that, being, obviously a bilateral funder, learning a lot from some, the UK and as well as the US, is a very, very important role. And that is why a lot of our funding now is moving more to strengthening ecosystems. Because I think historically what we've been doing in our context is supporting individuals. And individuals, for you to become a Bill Gates, you need an ecosystem or a system and a policy framework that supports you to grow. And I think that is one area I would say we have realized is very weak in our context, because if you think about what it takes to scale innovation to scale, there are so many things, legal frameworks, talk about intellectual property. And these are not things an innovator or a scientist can do on their own. And a lot of times also what happens is then our scientists, when they have these kinds of ideas or they do anything, it's very hard for them to even know where to begin to even patent something. But even if they're able to patent it, how are they able to mobilize that to become currency, to become, to be able to access capital or so the system, the fact that this system right now is very much on individuals, but not a lot on the supporting frameworks, enabling frameworks, and all these other things that are meant or important in terms of supporting that kind of individual to grow within a system. I would say this is where the gap is. And I've had a lot of conversations with Frank as one of our, regulatory experts in the, actually in the region. Just the importance of really focusing on not just training, people in universities or in innovation hubs, but really working with government and thinking some of these things transcend the health sector. So as I say, something like intellectual property is not specific to the health sector. A lot of the innovations are coming from the health sector, but if our scientists are going to be able to to realize that, then it will be important. And the other part I would say is linking to what Dr. Gakombe said. I think this idea that our scientists must access funding from, outside, big corporations that are not based here, a lot of times they're scooped. First of all, they don't even understand what, even the innovators who have a good, innovation, they really have a very low negotiating power when they have anything, just because they are individuals first, but also the kind of capacity we are providing them is only on building their innovation, not on how to develop a business. So how do we make sure that we are supporting them in that regard? And then the other thing I was just going to say is how do we create very enabling, and this is really a challenge again, I'm really pushing to the private sector and the government, and I mean here large corporate, because private sector is also some of the innovators who are trying to grow. How do we create an environment where, because of the kind of regulatory incentives that are there within government, our private sector can put money on the table. Right now, FCDO or UK companies are the only ones who are putting money on the table to support our innovators. So I'm really challenging our private sector to really come on board and really negotiate and work with government and bridge those boundaries to an extent where our own innovators can be able to negotiate and in a way also be not negotiate as individuals, have the government, and I'm talking to as well the presidential presidential unit. Really, the government should be negotiating this and not leaving our innovators or our scientists in universities to negotiate with big corporations. So I think that's a real gap and something that is a real opportunity, and we have the experts to support us with that. Over.
Thank you, Dr. Moi. Jackson, when we think PPP, we are thinking big projects. Somebody said Nairobi is a big construction zone. So how do we think differently? Just briefly.
Yeah, Dr. Marani, part of it is because that's what we know. We don't have any other examples apart from huge infrastructure projects for PPPs. In fact, you go to some countries where they do not have PPP projects, they don't even know how that works. So part of it is just what we are familiar with. So I start by saying that. Secondly, the PPP Act as currently drafted skews towards huge infrastructure projects. It incentivizes you coming in as a major infrastructure developer to come and engage with the government. So policy now here is driving what we are seeing. If it was to look at, to do a PPP, you need the public, you need the private. Let me address the public. So from a public standpoint, there also needs to be an appreciation of that what you're describing, like running a kitchen, that's an opportunity for a PPP. Do we have that appreciation that that can be packaged as a PPP? Because if there's no recognition from a public standpoint that that is something that could be done through a partnership with a private vendor, private provider, then it will never even be subjected to a PPP process. Secondly, you realize when you structure PPP deals, by and large, it's supposed to enhance efficiency. It's supposed to ease the burden, for instance, of the public, but still provide a way that the private partner can see a benefit in that. Unfortunately, I say a lack of a system is a system in itself. Even where we see something that is broken, there is a system that is operating, and for the beneficiaries of that system, it's working. So disruption of that requires that you overcome the gatekeepers of that system, and that can be a huge challenge. From a private sector standpoint, and the private sector players in the room, Dr. Gakombe and others, will tell you, they care about, at the end of the day, whatever we agree on, you fulfill that commitment. Will I get paid? And I think there's a question that I've been asked to Dr. Hungary about, commitments where private partners, or rather private sector that, perhaps not that large, engaging with government and having delayed payments and compromising, then remaining in business. So there is an aspect of that. Now, I'll say that I'm giving reasons, but I don't mean this to come across as if this is not possible, because part of what we're engaged in right now is the structuring of how this could actually happen in areas that in the past have not traditionally been considered for PPPs. Structuring a PPP, is a technical process. And sometimes because of the size of the private partner involved, they may not have the capacity to engage for that, PPP. And even though they engage, they may not check all the boxes. And then when they get into the arrangements, they find themselves compromised. And then in turn, that gives PPP a bad name. So the next private partner or private sector does no one now to jump in based on the experience from somebody else that got into it. So there's an opportunity at the end of the day.
Wangari?
Thank you for the question. Maybe the answer to that question lies with Frank here and his dean, because you need to start teaching behavioral economics. And once we have an understanding of why people behave the way we do, then the opportunities to address the question I got from the colleague from CHS, we'll start to understand that. Why do I think the French car, the German car is better than Mobius, as Dr. Gakombe said? And I want to link that to the question he asked me about the Sovereign Wealth Fund and the question we asked about the kitchen running being a PPP opportunity. So we do have examples of times when Kenyan products have emerged supreme, and and M-Pesa is usually the one we run to. There was none before, and we have made this thing. And when M-Pesa is shutting down, it's a nationwide announcement. It's done better than KPLC. It's done better than public holidays because we depend on it. And if anybody tried to come with another solution that is similar, M-Pesa is a benchmark, and it is a benchmark globally. Equity Bank is another one that, just came and disrupted the market. Banking was done this way before. If you didn't have a minimum balance of 5,000, you don't have a bank. And then it just became, come all ye my faithful children. And as long as you have a Kenyan ID, you have a bank account. And I think for the, 14th year running, they just won an award for being globally the best bank. So it's not impossible. I hear you and I know that perception is there, but there are also examples of when Kenyan products have risen to the top, not once, not twice, and I've probably given, the bigger ones. I would also probably like to bring it down to the fact that we see even financiers in the health sector see financing in the health sector to be the big stuff. So, I'm only going to finance Frank because he needs a CT scan machine or an MRI. I'm not going to, me as XYZ bank, I'm not going to finance Frank because he wants to do a PPP with Dr. Nyalita, who's going to run his kitchen, right? Even the understanding amongst the players in the PPP space, be they the regulators, be they the PPP unit, and I'm quite saddened our colleague Chris Kirigwa couldn't make it, but I've had several conversations with him to try and also demystify what PPPs could be in the health sector, beyond heavy infrastructure, heavy machinery. It really can come that down. And before we go to yes, Mercy, I see you. Before we go to public-private partnerships, maybe the challenge would be why is in that kitchen Dr. Gakombe's kitchen? Before you go to the county government and tell me there's too much bureaucracy, the county government will not give me their kitchen. Is Dr. Gakombe's kitchen run in that manner that we are describing? Is it run by the Mamambogas across, so that there's already proof of concept? It is possible to outsource this. If you think about 10 years ago, it was impossible to imagine that you could outsource cleaning of the hospital. It was impossible to imagine security. And we are there now. So, it doesn't need to take 10 years. I'm just saying it is possible, and it started by us observing what is happening in the private sector, and it now became natural. I have carefully avoided to answer the question, and then now my time is up.
Thank you very much. We give a round of applause to our panelists, including Dr. Sylvia Vitos joining us online. Thank you very much.
I want to make a comment on the PPP, if you can allow a minute.
Okay, just a minute.
Yeah, and that's to pull through to what Dr. Angari has said. And this is just to point out on some of the basic, what you call basic PPPs that are happening. And to what she alluded to, recently we sort of rolled out what's called Africa for More initiative, where we went in as an organization and built 1,000 nebulization stations across Africa, and Kenya specifically 334, realizing that for asthma patients, as an example, getting access to neb machines, or even just decency and dignity in asthma management with neb stations was not existent in most of our public facilities. And this didn't have to be a huge infrastructural investment in a lot of the county governments, because we did this across all county facilities, all the teaching referral facilities to install the 334. It was simply give us a wall, don't give us a room, because sometimes when we think about these investments, you want to get a room or build something. Take what is on the ground and improve on it, which is what we call strengthening the local healthcare system. So we installed 334 nebulization stations in the public space in Kenya, and majority of them are actually just a wall in the ANE, in a public facility where it's just been refurbished and remodernized to make asthma management more modern and using the latest technology of implementation. Then if you take, for example, another initiative called Dungabich, using water hyacinth to generate power for the women in Dungabich in Kisumu. So sometimes it's just to move away from saying the big sexy infrastructure investment to looking at what do we have on the ground, or what are we lacking if you look at the patient journey, and investing in bringing in a solution. So PPPs don't have to be the big infrastructure items. For us, we see it as service, investing in the service to the last mile. So I just want to point out on some of those examples. Of course, aside even Healthy Heart Africa, which is a big PPP to improve hypertension management in Kenya. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vito, for that. I think this conversation has been thought-provoking. It has actually opened most of our eyes, and from what I can see, the comments from our participants online and also the participants here. I could see very many people nodding their heads. So I think that meant not that time is up, but that we are all on the same page with everything that the panelists have said. But I think that's the importance of such forums and such summits, so that, you know, we share ideas, we share our thoughts, our experiences, what we see. And I'm sure from this conversation, somebody has been inspired, will think about something to manufacture those fat toothpicks, or, you know, to just ask for a wall like Dr. Vito is talking about, or go to a kitchen somewhere and say, you know, I can do something about this. And I think it's been quite a delightful and engaging conversation. Unfortunately, we couldn't pick all the questions, but we have seen all your comments and appreciation from everyone who's online about this particular conversation. Frank.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mosi. I have to say I'm blown away. I just really wish I'd carried my a bigger notebook, because I've written everywhere here. But again, just reflecting the key things that have come out of here, and Marcia just take exactly 1 minute to do that. The importance of a connected ecosystem has come out very clearly. And, you know, the whole of country approach to this, I think Claire underscored that. The whole idea that we are transitioning from an aid-dependent economy to a sustainable economy, and examples have been given. In fact, the one example that a few years back I was lucky to, and Dr. Marani was involved, but I was lucky to lead a team in assessing the South African health system on behalf of WHO. And one of the things that emerged was, I think in 2014 or 2015, the US government stopped buying their ARVs and they ran out. So for a whole, you know, they struggled. So they came back and they actually said, we'll still get aid. Of course, this was reversed. They came back and they say, we'll still get aid from the US government, but we are not allowing them to pay for ARVs. So they learned the hard way that even if we get aid, let them help us manage information and other things, but the medicines that are crucial for life saving will take over that knack. We don't always have to wait for periods of extreme pressure. Let's prepare for the transition. We have enough time, but I can assure you, if you have looked at the curve for what you call the Development Assistance for Health, DAH, it's been going down for a while. So aid is going, and we need to think sustainable. The third thing that came out very clearly is the importance of business ethics and collaborating in an open and transparent way. So bureaucracy, as Dr. Ongari has said, is there because there's a lot of dishonesty, and especially embarrassingly from some of the private sector players. So it's a chicken and egg problem. We sort that issues, bureaucracy becomes less, and you actually have the right people partnering with the government. Lucky for you, we have, if only we had an institution that focuses on training in these aspects with a very strong emphasis on business ethics. Oh, wait a minute, we are sitting in one. So we do have a very fantastic set of programs here at Strathmore, but, and this is me not marketing the programs, they are life-changing, and we really do focus on all-round education in terms of not just making a profit, but doing it with a purpose and doing it in a clean way. The other thing that came out is the importance of collaborating rather than competing, because 1 + 1 = 3. It's not always 1 + 1 = 2. We'll do a lot more when we work together. The final thing that came out quite strongly was the importance of being granular. So we don't need to always think about very big projects. There's so much that we can do. And as Jackson said, a lot of this you can even do outside the PPP Act. So people in serving sectors, health and education especially, we complain a lot about the PPP Act because of its emphasis on infrastructure and high dollar value projects. We can do a lot using the public procurement laws, and I think that's what Jackson was trying to emphasize. We just need to think innovatively about how we can structure this. And why do I keep saying PPPs? Why not just continue purchasing and procuring and doing it in a small scale? I think the answer to that comes from the idea of sharing risk. So the good thing about following a certain structure to these partnerships is you identify the party that is best able to handle different risks, and you get into a partnership where you maximize the benefits. So for instance, the government is better at handling political risk and other broader issues. The private sector is better at operational efficiency in some of the areas that could be slowed through bureaucracy. A partnership should accentuate the respective strengths. I don't think the private sector should come to government and do what government does better. And I don't think government should struggle when there are other actors who have the opportunity to do this. The Open Fences Hub, which is a new hub bringing together like-minded people to discuss how we can help the ecosystem transition towards a better connected and more effective partnership, is here. And I can tell you, this is the beginning of a conversation. We'll have a white paper, a very short 20-page that will be highlighting the key points from this. But more importantly, we are hoping to hold 4 forums in 4 counties in February that start taking these conversations to a more granular level. And we are planning for a fairly large, not large, but a regional forum in March in the Lake Region Economic Bloc, which is 15 counties in the western part of Kenya, where we'll bring together stakeholders to co-create, to start co-creating some of these solutions. So we are still in negotiation with one funder who I will not mention, but if this goes through, then that will actually demonstrate exactly what we've been talking about, moving from the boardroom, or shall I say the posh Strathmore Business School auditorium, to the front line where everything is happening. Thank you very much. Allow me to hand back to Mercy, and I know that the MC will have something for our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give this panel a round of applause.